Hi, I'm Celeste Ng. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to Penguin and HarperCollins for hosting this luncheon. I'm here to tell you a little bit about my debut novel, which is called Everything I Never Told You. Everything I Never Told You takes place in Ohio, which is my home state, where I grew up, in a small fictional college town, and it focuses on a mixed race Chinese and white family called the Lees. And when the novel opens, Lydia, who is the middle daughter of the family, who's 16 and who's everyone's favorite in the family, is not in her bed. And the family soon finds out that she's actually drowned in the local lake. And her death reveals a web of secrets that sort of threatens to tear this family apart. And everyone has a different idea about what might have caused Lydia's death. Her father, James, who's a first-generation Chinese American and a history professor of American history, is overcome at the thought of something in his daughter's life that he missed. Her mother, Marilyn, who is a white woman from Virginia, is convinced that someone had to have led her daughter astray. Her older brother, Nath, has always been overshadowed by his sister, and so in addition to grieving, has to grapple with their complicated relationship. And her younger sister, Hannah, who's 10, is trying to put all the pieces of her sister's life and of her family back together. How did Lydia end up in the lake? And what happened in the past that led her there? And most of all, how can this family survive this tragedy? Every member of the family, it turns out, has a lot of things that they have not been saying, hence the title of the book. So there's a mystery propelling the novel, but as you can probably already tell, it touches on a number of themes about race, identity, and family. The Lees are the only Asians in their community, and one of the things that the family grapples with is being very and visibly different from everybody else who's around them. Growing up, my own family was one of the only Asian families in the area. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then I moved to Cleveland, Ohio when I was 10, and neither of those cities has much of an Asian population, and so I was always the only one in my class who looked much like me, and it's a strange experience. Although I generally felt accepted and at home growing up, I still wasn't immune to hearing slurs or to being called names or to encountering what we might now call microaggressions, these little comments or gestures that really exist to remind you that you're different. Where are you from? No, where are you really from? Comments like those force you to continually be aware that you're different from everybody around you. And I've yet to meet an Asian American or actually any person of color who hasn't experienced something like that. So in writing this novel, I wanted to draw on that experience. I wanted the readers to have the pervasive feeling of being not only out of place, but of being conspicuous. To think about what it might feel like to have to feel continually other. And to take it further, because that's what fiction writers do, I wanted to explore what it might feel like to feel other even within your own family. To feel those sorts of pressures and assumptions and microaggressions from your own parents or even from your own spouse. The Lees, again, are a mixed-race family, and although James, the father, and Marilyn, the mother, love each other and have been together a long time, they've had very different life experiences, and the differences in their background make them see things and interpret events very, very differently. And they're not always able to share those feelings with each other. The children in the novel, meanwhile, aren't entirely sure where they belong or who they are. And part of the novel is them sort of wrestling with those identities, trying to figure out where they fit in relation to the world around them, and also trying to figure out how what other people assume about them matches up or doesn't match up with who they believe themselves to be. I think about this issue of otherness a lot, as you can probably tell, not only because it speaks to my experience, but because it speaks to the next generations as well. I'm in an interracial marriage myself, and I have a young biracial son, and so I spend a lot of time thinking and wondering and worrying about what his experience is going to be like. Will it be different from mine? In part, the novel grew out of me exploring what being mixed race and being between multiple cultures might be like. In addition to cultural issues, the novel also looks at issues of belongingness and identity in general, the ways that our identities are shaped by our parents. Parent-child relationships are one of the sort of major driving forces of this family tragedy. In the novel, Marilyn is what they would have called in the 1970s a housewife. She doesn't work outside of the home. But she had had other ambitions when she was younger. As a college student in the 50s, she had hoped to go into medicine and become a doctor, and it doesn't work out that way for her. Because of this, she has a lot of hopes for her own daughter, Lydia. She hopes Lydia will be able to pursue the career that she never got to have. And she, with the best of intentions, ends up putting a lot of pressure on her daughter. At the same time, James, the father, has always struggled to fit in socially, largely because of his race, and he really wants his children to have a more positive experience than he had. The lead children, however, aren't fully aware of their parents' experience. This isn't something that is openly discussed in the family, and so they don't totally understand why their parents are putting so much pressure on them in these different ways. And all of this intergenerational conflict, of course, feeds into the central tragedy of the book. I think a lot of first-year students end up relating to those kinds of parental expectations, especially as they make their way into the world on their own for the first time. In the novel, Nath, the older brother, is excited to strike out on his own. He's always been sort of overlooked in the family, and he can't wait to leave all of that behind. Lydia, meanwhile, who's always been the favorite, is terrified of what will happen when she leaves her family. And those two reactions, longing for independence and desperately fearing it at the same time, sort of are the push and pull that are central to the novel. Finally, at the heart of the novel are larger issues of erasure and visibility. When Everything I Never Told You first came out, I began to get emails from readers who were real people who, to my great astonishment, had actually read the novel. And I was struck by how many of them saw themselves in the characters. How many people emailed me and told me that the book reflected their experience in some way, as someone who grew up as a minority, or as someone of mixed race, or as someone who had a complex relationship with their parents or their siblings, or even just someone who felt that they weren't able to share how they honestly felt with the people who were closest to them. And when I got these emails, I was terrified. I said to my husband, the book is out there in the real world and people are reading it. And he gently reminded me that this is the idea when you publish a book. But now, more than a year after the novel was published, I can tell you that getting responses from readers like this has been hands down the most moving and the most rewarding part of the whole experience. Because the biggest theme in the book, and the thing that I think I always wrestle with in my writing, is being seen. Everyone in the novel is sort of struggling to be seen, and everyone is sort of overlooked for different reasons. The mother is frustrated that she'll always be seen first and foremost as a wife and a mother, and her own ambitions go overlooked. The father, James, is frustrated that he's always going to be viewed as a foreigner because of his face. Lydia, the troubled daughter, wants to be seen as her own person rather than a sort of blank screen on which her parents project their own desires. And her siblings long to be seen at all as they grow up in her shadow. In my own life, there have been many times that I've felt overlooked myself, that I've struggled to be seen or to have my voice heard. And this is true for so many groups, women, people of color, young people, any group that tends to be othered. So it meant a tremendous lot to me, and it means a tremendous lot to me to hear that readers feel seen by this book, to have people, both Asian and not, write to me and say, this book reflects my experience. As a fiction writer, I strongly believe that being seen is fundamentally what fiction is all about seeing someone from the inside out. There's no other medium that allows you to think somebody's thoughts or to feel their feelings, and that asks you so explicitly to think about what it might be like to live their experience. You get to know all the things that people keep inside them that they don't or they can't share with other people. And so I really believe that the best fiction is an exercise in empathy, in imagining what it's like to be someone else. When I'm asked, what do you hope readers will take away from Everything I Never Told You? That's really my best answer. I always hope that they'll close the book thinking about what they don't know about other people and ways that they can bridge those gaps between other people and themselves. Thank you.